Hey there, I'm Chuck Moran with Online Video Mastery, and I'm excited to be joined today by Sara Clayborne. Sara is the owner, founder of Charlottesville Ballet, a marvelous academy here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we'll get into a little bit of a description of what Charlottesville Ballet is all about. And I'm excited because Sara and I talked a month or so ago about some of the techniques that she's been using on Zoom to teach her students. And I was inspired by the different tips and tricks that she's come up with in response to the COVID outbreak. So I'm looking forward to diving into those tips and tricks with Sara. So Sara, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background, your bio, and then how you got into creating Charlottesville Ballet.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am Sara Clayborne. I'm the co-founder of the Charlottesville Ballet, along with my business partner, Emily Hartka. We founded the organization in 2007, and it was to see if it was possible to really live out the mission of health and wellness within the ballet world. And it's pretty typical in the ballet world for lots of unhealthy habits to come up. And so we wanted to see if it would be possible to start a company with just a more holistic approach within its mission. And so I'm originally from New York. I grew up on Long Island. I went to high school in Manhattan at the Professional Children's School. I danced professionally in New York before moving to Richmond, Virginia, and I had only intended on staying in Virginia for one summer. I wanted to get out of the city and see what the life was like. And upon living in Virginia for just those few short months, I realized that people were, not that people are not nice in New York, because they're lovely people, that's all my family, but people were so nice. The cost of living was so much less, and there really was a really wonderful, beautiful, thriving arts community. And so as I was dancing as a trainee at the Richmond Ballet, I was also teaching here in Charlottesville. And I was familiar with Charlottesville because my brother and my sister-in-law attended the University of Virginia. And I knew that Charlottesville was a very cultured community, but I realized that there was no professional ballet company here. And so Emily Hartka, who was a roommate of mine, we also waited tables together while we were dancing in Richmond together. She had planned to attend the University of Virginia. And so we decided we would do a case study sort of to see if it was possible to have a healthy ballet company. And we were both very young at the time and had nothing to lose. So we had nothing to put out with to start the company, but also at the same time, it was very little risk. You know, we were already waiting tables and working several jobs. So it was sort of just a lot of grit and passion for what we were doing and wanting to see if it was at all possible to start something new. And so in 2007, we started the company Charlottesville Ballet. It's completely a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3. We have three main components. So we have our professional company of dancers that come from all over the country and some even from abroad. They're professional dancers, which is hard for people to sometimes understand. They are at the highest level of their career. They audition to be paid by the Charlottesville Ballet to perform throughout Central Virginia. So they're really high caliber artists. In addition, we have Charlottesville Ballet Academy, and lots of our professional company dancers that are performers teach at our academy. So it's a unique advantage that our students have to have professionals that are still actively, most of them are actively performing or have recently retired from the stage, or even those that have been retired for a long time, they've had professional performing careers teaching. And those classes are from 1.5, and I think our oldest student is 90 or 92.
Wow.
And we have, so we have a bunch of students. And then the third component of the academy, the third component of the organization is the outreach and engagement program. We call that CD Moves. And that's where we go into public schools and do our Chance to Dance program. We go to the center here in Charlottesville where we serve senior members of our community in free programming. And we have a Movement for Parkinson's class that is a free class that we offer for anyone with any sort of movement disorder and their caretakers. And those are free programs that we do throughout the community. So we have lots of feelers out there, lots of different prongs of the organization. And we've been around since 2007. So it's been an exciting journey.
Wow.
all of it really with the mission of health and wellness to see if it was possible to really treat our dancers in a really healthy, holistic approach of not having one body type, one aesthetic, one look that is needed for the dancers. We just want healthy, fit dancers of all backgrounds.
That's great. Yeah, and all ages apparently too. Wow. Well, first of all, I have no idea how you get all that done. That's just, I don't know when you sleep. So there's must be lots of caffeine involved. A couple of questions. I wanted to ask you to dive a little bit deeper into the unhealthy stereotype that you were fighting against. And what was it? I can see why you'd be motivated to change that, but what are some of the characteristics of that stereotype that you wanted to change?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, my business partner, Emily Harka, is very open about her history with ballet and eating disorders. She suffered eating disorders for about 10 years before founding Charlottesville Ballet. And some of that, I think, has to do with just the culture of ballet and the history of how it evolved, especially in our country. And there is a very, very strict aesthetic for most ballerinas in our country and even abroad, that it is an aesthetic that is really it's really only possible for a very select few to achieve in a healthy way. And so we wanted to see if it was possible to not decrease the level of technical ability of artists, but just allow for more diversity in body type and body size and shape, and do that in a way that is authentic to the women, especially that are coming to dance and do this career, in a way that they can be truly artists, and that they're using their body in a way to express movement and to express emotion and to express a story. And we felt like it was something that was lacking in the ballet world. I think there's definitely a trend for this, but it wasn't at the forefront of any of the places that we had been working or training. And so with Emily having those eating disorders, with me, I started ballet later in life. I had always danced, but it wasn't my primary thing until I was older. Most young ladies start when they're about 5 or 6, and I wasn't really serious with it until I was about 13. So I believe I was able to sort of escape those things because it wasn't ingrained in me. That aesthetic wasn't ingrained in me from when I was very, very young. And so we wanted to just see if it was possible to create an environment where there's a new norm for the ballet world, and specifically for our students, because if you're raised in an environment where there's a particular aesthetic that you need to achieve, or you feel that you need to achieve, it may not even be openly expressed that way, but that's what you're constantly seeing, then you're going to sort of gravitate towards achieving that, especially when you have most ballet dancers just thrive in competitive atmospheres and are perfectionists. And so it just creates a perfect storm for injuries and eating disorders and disordered eating. And so it was really important for us to at least make an effort to try to see if we could change that. Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a story. I'm struck with the parallel that I think that especially female gymnasts encounter. So the disordered eating disorders and injuries and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, it's being surrounded by all that imagery, right? So you're a little girl and all you see are this particular body type, and there's only a couple of ways you can achieve that. And being able to break away from that, I think that's a very inspiring and noble mission that you've been on. So when you went to recruit the professional dancers, tell us a little bit about how you did that, and how did they sort of glom onto this idea of a healthier body type, healthier aesthetic for teaching dance to younger people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So originally the dancers that we recruited were just friends of ours that we knew were tired of the traditional ballet life and wanted to just, again, join us in the process and the journey of seeing if it was possible. And we were a brand new company with very little funding. So I think that they were all willing to take the risk to see if it was possible to make this work. I think now that this is our 13th season, I think that they all have really embraced that mission. I think that they're still learning for all of us, because the world of ballet does have a strict aesthetic, and also just in general, our culture for what we expect women to look like is very hard, and it's hard to break that that aesthetic and that desire for ultra thinness and not actual health. So we're working towards that. In the company, the teachers that teach both dance and teach for us, I think they're inspired by the kids that they teach. I think it's amazing to see how the kids can really embrace a mission when they're taught from the ground up, you know, from 3 years old. This is the mission that is brought to them. And I really believe that everybody that teaches here at Charlottesville Ballet Academy, I always say this to them, that when you sign up to teach, you sign up to be a role model. So they're setting an example, and all of our dancers are incredibly amazing athletes. They are just amazing athletes, and they're just teaching specifically young women, but young men too, that ballet can be for everybody, and it's more about health and wellness and strength than about achieving a very narrow aesthetic.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That really is interesting. Very cool. So obviously, until COVID came along, you were teaching, except for the outreach program, the academy portion was all at your facility. So tell us a little bit about the facility. You know, do you have several different studios that you work in? So just a little bit of description about how that looks.
Yeah, so we're here in Charlottesville. We have a space that is about 4,500 square feet upstairs, and then another 2,500 square feet downstairs. We have 5 total studio spaces, varying in sizes. And we've been in this location, I think, for about 7 years now. So we love it. When COVID hit, it was definitely a hit and a shock to everybody and everything that we knew with our business.
Well, bet. Yeah. So, so just to detour real quick, the age group that you teach is, I know you've got some 90s out there in your outreach program, but on site, what were the ages that you were typically teaching?
They start at 1.5, and I believe we have some adult students that come to our studio that are in their 80s, actually.
Wow.
So yeah, a big range.
Yeah, that is a big range. Okay, so all of a sudden COVID hits. You get the word that the governor's basically shutting down all in-person facilities in the state. And even if that were not the case, I know you wouldn't want to put your students at risk, nor your instructors, nor yourself. So that had to be a huge shock to the system. So tell me a little bit about the shock and then how you began to recover from that.
Yes, it was March Friday the 13th. I will never forget the day. And I'm not usually good with dates, but that date will stick forever. That was the day that we officially knew schools were closing. We knew really on that Thursday, the 12th, that we were going to have to make a change and make a shift and at least pause. And so that was the day that we decided we were going to be closing the academy. We originally, like most schools, thought it would close for 2 weeks. From there, we thought, okay, it'll be 2 months, and then, you know, we're almost 6 months in now. We're finally reopening, but it was definitely a shock to us. And immediately, we have an amazing staff of artists, but also administrators, and most of us wear 2 hats. We can do both, you know, executive work and artistic work, and I think that's also something that's unique for our team and is part of the holistic approach that we offer. We immediately thought, how are we going to do this? We can't just stop classes, so what are we going to do? And like a lot of other arts organizations, we shifted to Zoom, and Zoom sort of definitely, I'll say, saved us. And it was definitely a struggle in the beginning, but it was a quick shift because we didn't have a whole lot of time to transition. But that was our initial thought of we have to continue these classes. We can't just stop it for these kids, for the business, for all the teachers and artists. We need to continue in some fashion. So Zoom was definitely an integral piece of it.
That's great. So I would imagine your first impulse, and not having gone through it in any way close to what you did, I would imagine the impulse was to just, okay, let's just do everything that we normally do in person. Let's just put that in front of the camera on Zoom. So is that the case? Is that a fair assumption? It was just like, let's take our classes and put them online. It shouldn't be that hard, right?
Yes,
is that the case?
Yeah, that was exactly the case. We definitely knew it's going to be very hard because we offered about 99 classes. We offered 99 classes a week at the
Wow.
time. And
Wow.
we had only told our parents we're going to close for 2 weeks. So we had 14 days to get everything online, to get communication out to parents, to explain to parents, to get the staff trained, to set up processes and procedures. So we had actually less than 14 days because it took us a couple of days to figure out what platform we're going to use and make sure we were comfortable with that. So we definitely knew it wasn't not going to be easy, but we did know it was necessary because we could see very early on it was going to be more than 2 weeks.
Wow. Yeah. And so then is your schedule, was that fairly mappable over to Zoom? In other words, if you have an instructor that typically taught at 11 a.m. Or whatever day and time, was she able to pretty much say, okay, to her students that we're still at that time, it's just you need to be in front of your computer instead of coming over to the facility?
Exactly. So we set it all up in Zoom. We set different meetings as classes. We sent out Google Docs with those meeting links on it because lots of our students take multiple classes throughout the week. And so we had documents made per day with different links, sent out different passwords. We immediately were pretty good about security use of Zoom. We always had a waiting room that had a liability statement posted on there. As students came into the waiting room, they would see that and read that. We also had the teachers verbally say it again. And then we always had a password on all of the meetings that we made. In addition, we required kids to always have their video on, one, because we need to correct them and see them. And then they also needed to have their name on the screen. So that would help us easily take attendance and account that that was the right student in the right class.
Yeah, well, you did a lot of things very well, very early, because the whole issue around Zoom bombing was quite prevalent. There's still organizations that are freaked out about Zoom's quote unquote lack of security.
Yes.
My impulse was to tell people who are worried about it to hang tight because of Zoom's installed base, which was just literally Zooming. They had more impulse and more internal directive to fix things than anybody. They were taking a beating in the press. And so they started this 90-day, 256-bit end-to-end encryption pathway. They instituted the waiting room idea, the password right away. As far as I know, they've completed the 90-day encryption process with the advent of 5.0. And if folks who are watching this don't have 5.0 or whatever the 5.x is out now, make sure you update because there's some cool new things in it in addition to additional security. So, but yeah, that was really smart. And I can see how you were obviously directed because of the age of a lot of your students that you wanted to be able to protect the environment as well as you could.
Right.
Yeah, so then tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you began to face when it's obviously a different situation where you're not in a room with a nice wooden floor and a bar and mirrors. Now you're you're looking at little windows as an instructor. This is what I'm thinking about. So as an instructor, you've got these little boxes with all dozen or 16 of your students in there at once. So what was that like to start teaching that way?
Yeah, it was hard for the teachers, hard for myself to become adjusted to that. We did do some test teaching before some of the leadership staff did some test teaching on Zoom and played around. I had my some family members come on Zoom from New York, and I had them test out with me. Okay, can you hear my tap shoes in the garage? Can you hear the music and the tap shoes? Can you hear me speak? And so we tested some things out before we then we wrote it up in a manual and then brought that to our staff to share. Hey, these are our best practices of what we think is going to work best. Little things about audio settings that you can fix in Zoom, background settings, things that will just make the dance experience easier and teach dance. It was definitely hard for us. And we, again, I have amazing, amazing staff that were the ones really good at the technology and very quick with it. We even had teachers that as we were all starting to teach, they came up with helpful hints. We had a lot of teachers that hooked up to their TVs, so they had a bigger screen to see off of. And that's really helpful when teaching dance and teaching multiple students, to be able to see as many bodies on the screen as possible, even from their own home, was helpful. And then for a lot of the teachers, they did a great job in teaching from home because they could really understand what the kids were dealing with. So, you know, some kids had parents cooking dinner in the background, or a puppy dog running across the floor. And that was real life, you know, real life in the pandemic, being in quarantine at home. And so the teachers sort of had the same thing. A lot of us that have children had to deal with figuring out childcare or quiet time for kids while you're trying to teach. And it was a challenging experience, but as a collaborative team, we all worked together. We had weekly meetings, which was very beneficial for the team, where we were able to share those tricks and tips, and then added those into our handbook manual. That was a living manual. It was all online, of course, so we could constantly update it.
Wow. Yeah. Like I said, sounds like you figured out a lot of things, and have been able to maintain that level of professionalism. So how about engagement? I hear again and again, I talked to a colleague this morning who's a professional educator and has her own classroom without walls that she's building right now. And she comes from a background of brain science and really deep learning about teaching and learning. And it was interesting listening to her talk about how, and you hear this in a lot of settings, how hard it is for kids to, you know, stare at a camera or stare at a screen and take classes when they're used to all the socialization that used to go on in the classroom. Yes, you don't have the distractions of the other dancers near you, but on the other hand, you don't have the camaraderie and the visual cues and all that kind of thing. So just on the subject of engagement, how and the difficulty of getting kids to pay attention with this new environment, what kinds of things have you found that work?
Yeah, so a few things. The first one is just acknowledging, we did this a lot in our staff meetings, just acknowledging what you said, knowing that these kids are, one, they were in front of screens, most of them for most of the day, daytime hours, doing schoolwork. And then this was usually their time to just relax and release and use their bodies. And now again, we were asking them to be in front of a screen. So acknowledging that, we actually, in the beginning of our classes, I encouraged all the faculty, even for our littlest kids, to have just a moment where they could talk to them. So they would prompt them with a question of, what was something in this time where you're stuck at home, can you think of one thing that you're really grateful for? What was something amazing that you didn't think you'd ever get to do? Maybe that was you got to eat lunch with your mom, who usually is working, or maybe it was you got to sit in the backyard and read, you know, do your schoolwork in the backyard, or whatever it was. And so that was one thing, just acknowledging that this is a different environment. We can't hold kids or ourselves to the same standard that we usually had. The second one was taking them, and I did this a few times, taking them out of the screen environment. So saying, okay, we're going to do this dance project. And I did this for a contemporary class that I taught. We're going to actually, you know, mute ourselves. We're going to take ourselves off camera. And I want you to go somewhere, find a safe spot. It can be for a kid that lives in an apartment. It can be on your balcony. It could be just you opening your door on a little tiny step of your porch. It could be in your huge backyard with acres of land. I want you to go somewhere outside and just look around. And I want you to find 5 things that you see. What are the first 5 things? Write them down and then come back and put your screen on and I'll know you're back. And then they, from there, created movement to describe those 5 things. And then we all collaborated on that movement of those 5 things and made a beautiful story of it. And I did get their consent to film them. We filmed in gallery mode, and it was beautiful to see what they all saw. First of all, they all lived in different environments. They come from, you know, different sorts of households, some very rural, some living in the city. And it was beautiful to see how they could collaborate even with the screen. And I think just getting them away from the screen was helpful to reset their mind and reset how they were approaching the classes. So those are the two big things. The third one that we did do as far as engagement was we offered additional content. So the teachers would film a portion of the class. You know, filming an entire class, hardly anyone wants to watch an entire ballet class again, even those that love ballet. There's just a lot of correcting time and downtime of students trying to perfect the movement. But we would film an adagio section of class where the students were really working on slow movements and sequence of movements, and we would film that section and then email that to the students and their families with maybe some corrections or some positive reinforcement or additional footage from professional ballet dancers doing similar movement, and a, you know, a YouTube link saying, hey, have the students watch this, they can watch this and mimic that dynamic of movement. So those are the three engagement things that we found really valuable, and I actually, it helped me in the process of teaching.
That's really great. Where'd you get the idea about sending them off screen and outside and collecting the 5 things? That's a neat idea.
Yeah, I think I was just tired of being in my basement or garage cooped up. And I thought, let's just see if there's a way to get them outside and, you know, and moving in a safe way, because for ballet, you do need specific floor to do specific things. And we wanted them to stay healthy. But then on the creative aspect of it, and especially for contemporary dance, it was just the perfect environment for them to leave the computer for a second, come back.
That's great. So then when they came back, and let's say you've got everybody back now and all their cameras are back on, and they described their 5 things. What was it? Was there what was the creative process that came from there? Did one person say all 5 of the things that she found, and then you created something around that and then moved to the next one, or was it more of a group activity?
Good question. We actually, so the group that I did this with, they were, I want to say between 8 and 12 years old, maybe 9 and 12 years old for age. They each picked their 5 things. They wrote it down, and they could write it on a phone, an iPad, a piece of paper. They brought it back in. The first thing that I had them do was just create movement to those 5 things that they saw.
Okay.
And then I didn't even ask them what it was that they saw. I just wanted to have them create movement so that they could remember it and easily remember the feeling behind it. What did the structure look like? How did this object move? Was it stationary? And so then from there, they all did that without watching each other. And then we broke it down where I spotlighted each student, I should say, and they each got to watch each other, and they read their 5 things in the order that they were going to perform their 5 things. And then from there, we sort of linked them all together and made a little video from it.
Oh, that is really cool.
And
very clever.
I believe I also had them, I picked different music, and I wanted it to be pretty unstructured. So I picked different music and I let them decide what piece of music they liked the best. They did a little vote on it, and then we set it to music, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
That is really cool. I've been, especially around music and performance, there's been some amazing Zoom collaborations.
Yes.
That I've seen. These choruses that start out with, one image of one person who begins, a cello piece or something, and then the rest of the orchestra comes in, and suddenly they're like just 100 people singing, and it just makes your heart sing, right?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Very cool. So, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Sara, to things that you've learned, or how you're going to be transitioning back? Let's just talk about that. That's a good question I just thought of. Transitioning back to kind of a split reality now. So you are moving back indoors to a certain extent. Are you going to continue the Zoom classes?
Yeah, we have, we just officially reopened yesterday.
Wow.
So we have lots of options now that we're, a couple months into COVID. We have in-person classes with very, very limited class sizes just due to the nature of the virus. So we do have in-person classes. Everyone is required to wear a mask, and they are staying far, far apart. And we have our studio blocked out with tape to keep physical boundaries. From there, we also offer hybrid classes. So we've in the past had about 600 students. Our enrollment has decreased since COVID, but to at least be able to serve the students that we knew wanted to come back, we knew there'd have to be a hybrid approach. So similar to how a lot of the public schools are working, we created, because it's Charlottesville and UVA is here, we created an orange group and a blue group.
Yeah.
And so the first week back, the blue students come in person and the orange students arrive to the same class. They're just joining in online. When those classes are really big, we'll have an assistant Zoom teacher that is helping correct the students that are on Zoom. The teacher in the physical location is still the one planning the class and guiding the class, progressing them through the curriculum. The assistant is another teacher, but they're correcting the Zoom students. And then there are some classes where there's less enrollment in those two colored classes. So the teacher is both correcting students on Zoom and students in the classroom. So we call that our hybrid approach. We have really amazing, generous donors that donated TVs and laptops and web cameras and AirPods and all of the devices you could ever dream of. We sent out requests, and we have the most amazing donors that have supported us through the setup process, and amazing staff that set it all up. So each of our studios have big TVs, which I never thought we'd have in a dance studio, but it's been amazing the first couple of days to see how those kids can react to each other, can watch each other, can learn from each other. That's our second approach. And then the third one is that we do have some families that just don't feel comfortable sending their kid in person at all. And we understand that and want to make it accessible to those families as well. And so we have some Zoom only classes still where they are just meeting online, doing the same Zoom process that we've been doing since March. So 3 different options to hopefully make it as accessible as possible within a pandemic.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And then how about the geography that you served, let's say in February versus where you are now? Has that changed dramatically?
It has.
In terms of your service area?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had a few adults over Zoom that joined from afar, and we did have at least one student that had moved to Maryland that then joined us for class via Zoom. So not a huge growth as far as geography for us. I think that's because there are some amazing dance companies doing similar things in their hometowns. And so I think a lot of people want to support their local dance organizations and continue to take classes with them. But it has been really amazing to see, specifically for the adults that feel more comfortable doing classes over Zoom. They can shut their camera off if they feel embarrassed about doing one step that they're they don't feel like they're great at. And so we have had an increase of adults taking Zoom classes.
That's really cool. That's great. So if people want to learn more about your organization and what you have to offer, where should they go?
Yeah, so we have, we're active on social media. We also have our website, charlottesvillevalley.org. But that's probably the easiest place to find all of our information. But we are on Facebook and Instagram as well, so you can visit there as well.
Great. And are your social media channels linked into your website, so it's easy to go to your charlottesvilleballet.org and then click out?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Sara, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. You're full of information, and hats off again to you and your staff for being able to recover from that COVID shock to the extent that you have. I think it's remarkable. It sounds like you're really thriving.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure.